Good afternoon, everybody. Before we get started, I wanted to remind everyone that today's session is being recorded. All lines are muted, and we ask that all participants stay on mute throughout the presentation. If you've dialed in using your cell phone, please press *6 to mute your phone line. Okay, Brian, I think we are good to go.
All right, great. Hello, well, I jumped ahead. I'm Brian Thompson. I'm the Director of Business Development for Bytemakr. Actually, first off, I should say I spent the first half of my career, perhaps around 16, 17 years in the parking industry. So it's great to see so many familiar faces. I've been to no fewer than 10 IPI and IPMI conferences. So I'm really excited to be here and to be able to give back and share some of our learnings. So again, I'm the Director of Business Development for Bytemakr. Bytemakr really at its core is a transportation payment system provider. We work with several very large transit agencies in North America and Europe, with the Presto system in Toronto being probably one of our largest. But along with our partners, Siemens Mobility and HaCon, we have created the what's called the Bytemakr Bridge, which is really a mobility as a service platform that allows agencies to add different services. So today we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about app stickiness, and I'll get into what that really means and some ways that we find is good ways to make your app sticky and really get people to actually use it, which is the whole point. And we'll go a little bit into mobility as a service, really what it is and how we've applied some of these learnings to our mobility as a service platforms around the world. So I think we all remember the phrase, there's an app for that. I think after a while, a lot of us wanted to forget it because quite frankly, there really is an app for everything. And in fact, well, Apple trademarked this phrase because they understood that apps were the things that were going to make their phones so much more than phones. In fact, it seems silly to even call them phones. I don't know why I'm having to click twice. All right, there we go. So there are 2 million apps in the App Store today. There's about 3 million in the Android store. And so if you're developing an app, you want to make sure that you're going to be used and not one of those apps that's just passed over or is downloaded and ends up in the far dark areas of someone's phone, never to be used. There we go. So it's obviously different kinds of apps. I just found out today actually that TikTok is the most popular app in the world. Not sure how I feel about that, but social media and communication really is at the top for obvious reasons, the network effect. You're going to use these platforms because your friends are using them, because you want to communicate with someone on the other end who's also using WhatsApp. So you're going to use WhatsApp. It's a little bit different with transportation. You really need to provide a very significant utility to get people to use your app and stay on it. So we talk about the term of stickiness. And there is a mathematical formula for this that's really your daily users over your monthly users. And you can really calculate it any way you want, but the general idea is how often are your active users actually using your app? We probably all downloaded apps that we didn't use for various reasons, and they just sat there. So we try to avoid that, obviously. So how do you make your mobility app sticky? And the first rule is, and this applies to any app you're going to build, what problem are you actually solving? And in transportation, this is very simple because even during COVID, when we're not traveling as much as normal, we still have to get from A to B. It's a very simple problem. What are my options? So we aim to demystify the ability, how do you pay for your transportation? And really, who is your audience? One of the big mistakes that is made is onboarding. We make as many features as possible available to people to try out before they sign up. Because typically, When you register for an app, you're giving up your mobile number or your email address. You're giving up some personal information, and if they don't understand what they're getting in return for that, they won't download your app. And so, in our example, we let them plan trips, let them use the routing features, let them see how it works, and then when it comes time to purchase a fare or pay for a ride, pay for a bike share ride or what have you, then for obvious reasons, we need to have them sign up. And then also you want to right size the security for the information you're sharing. You don't need a blood sample to sell a bus ticket. Fresh content. This in our space is absolutely imperative. And the example I give is if your app provides movie start times and it's not accurate, it's an inconvenience for someone. If your transportation information, if your origin, destination, arrival, and departure time for your bus or trains or what have you is not accurate, then people end up stranded. They can miss a flight. They can have serious problems. So it's extremely important to keep that information accurate, real time, and frequently update it. And don't make people search for the simple tasks they need to do every day, like checking the arrivals and departures from a single location, for example. So, and engagement. Engagement is key. I think people don't realize, or transportation systems have never had this level of direct engagement with their customers, with their ridership ever. Transportation agencies spend a significant amount of money doing in-bus surveys, extremely expensive, and you can now do that through your apps. You can also deliver really great live customer support. We've done live chat with systems in Dubai, for example. If you have a problem with your trip, you can literally talk to someone and get help. And then also you can use user-sourced content. This has become very important during COVID when you want to provide occupancy of certain vehicles. You can get users to say, hey, this is an empty vehicle, and you can develop great data around that. And then, of course, rewarding loyalty, which in the transit space, this has a lot of definitions, but one of the most important is fare capping. Fare capping means you buy several day tickets, and that equates to a monthly ticket, which is a great help to people who can't afford the upfront cost of a monthly pass. And then this is doesn't necessarily have to do with stickiness, but if you're going to design anything that touches federally funded transportation system, you have to keep equity and accessibility in mind. It's not even an option. And so supporting barrier-free navigation, directing people to elevators, lifts, what have you, extremely important. Supporting screen reader tools and IVR. The IVR systems have used to be you punch a button. Now you're having full-on conversations with them, and they've been great for trip planning. And then you also want to not forget about the cash preferred. And the term unbanked is used a lot, but really, some people just don't use cash, not because of a lack of resources, but because they don't want to be tracked. That is an issue. So we want to support it. And so what we'll do is create a retail network and allow people to go to stores, give them cash, and then load funds onto the app. So this has to do with transportation, parking, or anything. So we take these ideas and we apply them to our mobility as a service platforms. And I know that term is thrown around a lot. I have this great video that I borrowed from one of our clients. This is for a full country, not full city, not full county or region, but full country mobility as a service platform for the country of Denmark. And I'll get into really what is mobility as a service, but I can tell you straight ahead, it's not an app. We talk a lot about mobility as a service apps, but it's not an app. Apps do play a significant part in helping people access the mobility system, but that's important to know. And then we'll go into the goals and then how we're able to do this, the different technology, the standardized data feeds, excuse me, as well as the ability to interact with some of these new shared mobility systems and provide a full mobility coverage for whatever your needs are. So at the core of, if asked to give a definition for mobility as a service, there's a lot of different definitions, but I like the idea of saying, hey, it's allowing people to use and buy the transportation they actually need and not what they don't. And a good friend of mine, who's a big thought leader in this space, likens it to buying music now. We used to buy the CD or we buy the DVD. We'd watch it once and have it sit around. Now you just rent it or you just purchase the single song. So and it's really about, it puts the user at the center and allows them to chain together trip segments, be them shared bike to a bus stop, which takes you to a train stop or a train station where you grab a car share vehicle. It involves real-time alerts, so you're fully informed during your entire journey, which you could do this. You could do this before phones. I mean, all this shared bike share existed before phones. Car share existed before phones. But to be able to plan all this and chain it together and get real-time information really has only existed in the last few years. So what are the goals? There's all kinds of lofty goals and obviously sustainability initiatives. If everyone drove into our cities, it would be very, very challenging. And I know that may not make some of my colleagues in the parking industry happy. And I'll get into parking in a bit because it really does play a very important part in mobility as a service. But it's about simplifying the mobility ecosystem for people so that they can ingest it, consume it in an easy way. And I like to tell the use case or the story of somebody who gets up in the morning and says, hey, I could take the bus in today, but I want to meet someone for lunch across town, or I have a dentist appointment. Do I have the ability to get to these other places throughout the day? And mobility as a service and the platforms are giving people the confidence to be able to do that. And we think that's very important. So, of course, we could only do this in the last few years because of what's called the GTFS, or it used to be the Google Transit Feed specification. It's now general because Google didn't want to have anything to do with it. But it was created by some very smart people in my home city of Portland, Oregon. It's now used worldwide. Thousands and thousands of agencies produce their scheduled data in a static GTFS feed. And many of them, not all of them, also provide a real-time GTFS feed, so you can feed them into these trip planners and get really accurate transportation information. Of course, the bike share providers got together and created their own specification that's really modeled after the GTFS. And then there's a series of other standards, and I would argue, there's almost an infinite number of standards, and at that point they're no longer standard. So I think the focus really is now on the GTFS and GBFS. And of course, there's other versions of it, the GTFS Flex, which I need a whole other half hour to get into. So, and that's what really allows us to, like, for example, on the screens, this is from a trip planner that we built for BART in San Francisco. We've ingested the GTFS feeds from 31 different agencies. So literally you can take a trip from up in Santa Rosa all the way down past San Jose just using transit. It's a distance of over 100 miles. And of course, we don't want to leave out shared mobility as well as parking. And we've been able to integrate with some of these shared mobility providers really through the use of APIs so that we can allow you to locate the vehicles, unlock them, and pay for them. And then I think one of the more exciting parts, although it doesn't sound exciting when you say it, common payment accounts, doesn't sound terribly exciting, but this idea that you could have one single account and draw funds for your various transportation is it's an exciting topic in our space. And lastly, because this is somewhat of a parking conference, I should mention that initially in mobility as a service or MaaS conversations, parking was really left out of it. And I think the idea was let's completely get away from owned cars. But the reality is we have 150 million people driving to work in the United States every day. And that's not going to change overnight. And we feel it's important to support drive to transit, to support navigation to parking. It's just a reality of how our cities are built right now. And so we feel that's incredibly important. And again, I could fill an entire presentation just about how we've done that. So I don't know how I'm doing on time, but I think I'm right at 15 minutes. Rita, you have some questions for me?
You are doing good. I have not seen any questions. One person did join late and they wanted to know they missed number 3, unfortunately.
Number 3 is, do I scroll back? Is this bad form?
It's okay. There you go.
Yeah, content. I think it goes without saying that your app needs to be intuitive. But the example I provided here is that the information you're providing is so incredibly important. And when people use your transportation apps, they're trusting that you can get them where they need to go, and ultimately you can get them home. And if your information's not accurate, or if you're using a bike share provider and you're counting on that and there's no bikes available because they haven't been repositioned where you need them, that has major consequences for those travelers. So I'd say this really should be number 1, because I think it's the most important for any mobility as a service provider or just standalone transportation app provider. With that, I'll have a sip of tea. No questions?
Yeah, so Brian, someone wants to know more about what Bytemakr does.
Oh yeah, sure. So again, we started out as just a payments provider, mobile payments provider. Our first client was actually a ferry in New York City, and our founders really they realized that you have these agencies are spending a crazy amount of money on ticket vending machines and accepting cash on board, which slows down the boarding process, as I think many of us know. And so they thought, well, everybody has a vending machine in their pocket, so why not create a way to pay with your phone? And so that really is how we started. And then we were acquired by HaCon, which is I'd say arguably the world's largest provider of white labeled trip planning solutions. We built, like, if you travel in Germany, if you use the Deutsche Bahn Navigator app, that's one of our products. And so we merged the two, the payment side and the trip planning and passenger information side, to make the Bytemakr Bridge platform. Did I do it justice? I see a lot of familiar faces. I'm sure you have some tough ones for me.
Ryan, question. Do you think what do you think the proper balance is? When you're looking at developing an app, you want to provide as much service as possible to encourage people to use it. But do you think there's a point where even if you can provide the service, it becomes counterproductive?
Well, I mean, too much information, right? I mean, absolutely. You only have so much space, and fingers are, I mean, you can only we run into this occasionally where you can only put a certain number of buttons in an area, and you want to make sure that information that people use on a daily basis is easily accessible. So yeah, I mean, I think there is I think you can provide too much information. I think also you got to be careful to not go down these kind of tunnels where you're just focusing on one thing. And I think, it's important to provide transit information. We see transit as king. That's the reality. I mean, the New York subways provide as many trips in one day as I think, the second largest rideshare provider provides nationwide in one day. So, so I think it's important to develop for the masses and then start adding on the different features. So I don't know if that helps. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I was muted. Sorry. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Brian, we also have a question here from Yvonne. She wants to know, how does an entity evaluate the merits of the slew of MaaS providers that are coming on the scene?
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good question. And there's a lot of trip planners out there that are sold as mobility as a service. I think look at what they've created. I think another important part is question whether you want to have a relationship with the customer and if you want to protect that data, because there's huge differences between companies that monetize that transportation data. We don't do that. When we build a platform for you, like for example, if you're a transit agency, you own that data 100%. I cannot sell it to someone. I can't provide it to another provider who may want to put people in autonomous vehicles, that sort of thing. So I think that's an extremely important thing to ask is, do you own that data? And then do you own the relationship? Because going back to engagement, if we can get to that slide, this is your direct communication channel to your ridership. And private mobility providers, the scooter, bike share, car share, I fully understand why, they understand this. They absolutely want to own that relationship with that customer. And I think transit agencies really need to do that as well, so that they can control that the information that's pushed out really jives with their initiatives. And I'll give you an example. If you're a transit agency and one of your initiatives is to reduce congestion in a city, having a trip planner that's prioritizing rideshare over transit use doesn't really help you reduce congestion in your city. And so I would definitely look at that as well. And make sure you have control over that information that's pushed out.
Brian, we also have a question from Gary Means. He wants to know if you can share more about cash preferred options, especially in a Muni environment.
Yeah, so here, well, I guess you don't need to see that. So yeah, this is really a new thing, and we're not the only ones to do this. Of course, this has been one of the hotter topics, and actually also with the pandemic, is that they wanted to reduce the number of touches on the TVMs, as well as reduce the need for people to pay in person at or pay a driver or that sort of thing. So what we'll do is we'll connect with one of the cash network providers. There are several of them, and literally you walk in and pay you hand them cash, scan a QR code, and it loads the funds into your account. Now, I don't know if I necessarily understood in a Muni as in a municipal setting, or what exactly was the question for Muni? Gary,
you want to unmute?
Yeah, I was thinking about just various ways. We've talked about it even from like scooters, but when I said Muni, I meant more like in a municipal setting or from a city's perspective. But I suppose it would work as well for maybe in a university environment.
Yeah. So and this is one of the benefits of the common payment system. If you can provide one place where people can load cash into, and then they can use it for their bus, they can use it for ride share, car share, bike share. really one point of, what was that, one point of loading cache, one point of service, then that's a big benefit. Or parking,
Okay.
of course. Yeah,
We have another question here. Ron would like to know, have you seen a problem with commercial for-profit vendors sharing data for an inclusive trip planners?
A problem. Do I see a problem with it in the future? I don't necessarily see a problem with, have I seen a problem in the past? Well, okay, so the way I see it is that the reason I feel it's so important for especially publicly funded transit agencies or city mobility as a service initiatives, the reason I feel they need to own the relationship and own the data is because, let's say someone comes along with a autonomous vehicle, fleet of autonomous. Let's say there's someone out there with a very large electric car company, and they can suddenly turn all their cars into autonomous robo-taxis. I'm not saying that exists, but let's say that's a real thing. And they come out and buy one of these trip planners. They now have access to thousands, hundreds of thousands of, if not millions of transit riders and their data, and could very easily put them into their vehicles over transit. I see that as a real potential threat. Have I seen issues of data being shared? No, not necessarily. I mean shared like data leaks, that sort of thing. No, but I don't think that's necessarily what the question was about.
Okay, Hank is saying, if we have a parking app, what is the most important next thing to try to integrate to move forward toward a MaaS environment? Should we go for impact or ease of integration, low-hanging fruit opportunities? Also curious about municipal ownership over MaaS as an industry moves in this direction. Seems like the public interest factor is slipping away.
Yeah, I'm going to start with the second one first, because that's, it's not just because we build systems for cities, for governments and transit agencies. But I feel that publicly operated mobility as a service platforms make sense. And there's a reason for that. Transit agencies are not in the business of making money. They have a mandate to provide an essential service to our communities. And I think that more and more agencies are open to subsidizing bike share. I think that's been the first one. Will they get to the point of subsidizing scooters and ride share and car share? I don't know. But I feel like they're the best position to balance the sustainability initiatives, the equity initiatives with the need to make money. And I'm in private enterprise, and I very much believe in it, but I feel that sometimes balancing your duty to shareholders is not the same as your duty to your community. And I think transit agencies have a better sense of duty to community. And going back to parking apps, I'm sorry, what exactly the question again was, if you could read that.
The first part of the question was, if we have a parking app, what is the most important next thing to try to integrate to move forward towards a MaaS environment? Should we go for impact or ease of integration?
Impact or ease of integration. Interesting. Well, I mean, I think routing to your facilities, making them part of the multimodal journey, I think is very important. Again, drive to transit there's a big push for that among agencies, especially in areas like Texas, for example. We have several clients, and they have massive park and ride facilities, and so directing people to those so they can ride transit in is very important to them. The other part of that is a difficult question: ease of use or impact, right? I think inter-app links are fine if that's maybe ease, and impact is full integration. I think you start with inter-app links, if I understood what the questioner meant by that.
Okay, then we have one more comment here from Sam. He says, some companies are looking at appless concepts using texting and mobile browsers as opposed to apps, as more people are concerned with privacy. Do you see this catching on long term, and what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so we do build mobile apps, or excuse me, web apps as well. We don't see the kind of adoption of them or use of them as much as we do the apps. I mean, I think that's great if you can. Yeah, the texting is interesting, and I've seen some of those systems, but I think I wouldn't want to comment on that because I haven't used any of them yet, so I don't think that's fair. Yeah, but again, look, any way you can deliver the same utility, we absolutely support, and we're gonna go in that direction if that's the direction of consumer behavior.
I think that's all the questions we have, Brian. That's everything that's in chat. You're right on time. You're 5:30. I just want to thank you for your presentation. And everyone else, the next set will start now. So you have two presentations going on from 5:30 to 6 o'clock, and you'll access them the same way you access this. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. And thank you for narrating or moderating. And thank you everyone for joining, and have a great evening.